Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Misa back! No, wait, not that. Weesa back! That's right. It's Aggressive Negotiations, and we're back. We're back. Yes, after a prolonged sojourn in hyperspace, where I think there was some sort of like hyperspace accident that's unexplained and weird plant creatures and everything. We're back here. I am one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and with me on this tremendous journey exploring all of the dark recesses of the Star Wars galaxy is my dear friend, my compatriot, my battle partner, my cannon fodder. Wait, scratch that last one. Ignore. Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, how are you? And welcome back.
Well, I can't decide if I'm cannon fodder or not, so I'm a little worried about that. And I'm a little worried because I feel like Endor is a lot different than the last time I was there.
But see, the thing is, you were looking over to the left the last time you were at Endor, and now you're looking over to the right.
Okay.
So it's everything that was behind you.
Okay.
Yeah. There you go. See? All right. Before we get into this, and that was a beautiful little taste from Matt about what we're going to be talking about this time. Of course, go to thenerdparty.com, find all of the great shows, everything from Doctor Who to Star Trek to movies we should have seen to movies we haven't seen to directors that we love to directors that we think great things about to the A24 project to whatever. Go over to thenerdparty.com. You want to reach out to us, go to thenerdparty.com/contact. We do our best to reply. We really do. We appreciate everybody that does reach out to us. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at The Jedi Masters. You can follow the network at Join Nerd Party. You could follow the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. And maybe, just maybe, if you wish upon a star, we will send a cricket to go into your house and chirp madly, preventing you from sleep. So here we are. And this was something I'm very much looking forward to because you, Matt, you're a young one. A youngling, they might say. So you have no memory of seeing this as a child, what we're about to discuss. And what we're about to discuss is Caravan of Courage, an Ewok adventure, also known as the Ewok Adventure, also known as the Ewok Adventure Caravan of Courage, also known as Caravan of Courage. Depends on what source you read. But it was the Ewok Adventure when I was growing up. I got to ask you, Matt, confirm or deny, were you old enough to be aware of the Ewok Adventure Caravan of Courage when you were a youngling?
So this came out in 84, so I was 5.
Yes.
So I was old enough that I could have been aware of it, but I was not old enough to have seen all of the Star Wars movies at that point. I didn't see them all until I believe my 7th birthday, where I watched them all together, and I've told the story before, so and so no, I did not get a chance to see this until Disney Plus decided that we needed a vintage Star Wars collection.
Which is an interesting decision in and of itself. I was old enough to be aware of the Ewok Adventure. I was old enough to be excited about the Ewok Adventure. And if anybody has not watched it, we're going to be spoilerific. Lots of spoilers in this, although I would say, Matt, that can you really spoil the Ewok Adventure? Can you really give away too much of this plot in a simple discussion like we are about to have? Or is this a spoiler-proof event?
It's pretty spoiler. I mean, you can't spoil this thing. There's nothing to spoil.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward. A family crash lands on Endor, the moon of Endor, the moon orbiting Endor, however you want to say it. And the kids find themselves teaming up with the Ewoks to go and rescue their parents from what is apparently a gigantic monster that lives on Endor, that somehow the Empire never had to deal with, which is
apparently
good for
Gorax
them.
was not around then, or maybe was in hibernation or something.
Maybe this was the last one.
Could be.
Right?
It could definitely be.
This could have been the last one. So just to give background here, like I said, I was aware of this. I watched it when it was on television. I remember there was a lot of energy around it. I remember there was excitement. I remember disappointment, specifically because even at the tender age that I was when this came out, one of my first thoughts was, wait, this is before Return of the Jedi? And then additionally, so the Ewoks encountered humans and learned some English words, which I could let slide except for the fact that Wicket is among those people. Mm-hmm. So, and Wicket's still the same age when we encounter him. So how far before Return of the Jedi is this? So your judgment, is this canon or is it canon adjacent going all the way back to the 1980s? Would you have judged this as canon adjacent or canon?
I like to think of this as an Elseworld story.
Ah, okay.
So that's kind of where I go with it. Yeah. And so I mean, it truly does to me feel like more of, let's put it this way. You know what it feels like is the tales from Star Wars books that we've been getting. That's what it feels like.
Interesting.
So this feels like a tale that would be told around a campfire or like almost like a fairy tale type thing that kids would hear from their parents. And this is a story that somebody told their kid. And that's what this is. So
I think we're kind of tipping our hand here in terms of what our general reactions are to it. So obviously we have something. You had said this doesn't look like Endor. Well, you didn't say these exact words, but a couple of minutes ago you said Endor seemed different to you. What is it specifically that stands out to you as different? What does this seem like? It's authentically Endor, like just a piece of it you haven't seen before? Or does this strike you as something of they couldn't go back? Why weren't they at the same location? Like, is it an incongruity that bothers you? Or is it something that you can rationalize and just say, this is just a part of Endor that we didn't encounter in the movie?
Having been to Skywalker Ranch,
yes,
it was very apparent that we were at Skywalker Ranch because I've seen those hills before and some of those trees before and some of those woods before. And so we are legitimately in the area around and in Skywalker Ranch. We're truly never in the redwood forests because they're never in the redwood forest. You can tell none of the trees are big enough. In fact, there's even that hilarious bit where everybody's kind of coming down because they're getting ready to go on the caravan, and they've been up in one of the tree houses. But then you come down, and all the trees look way too skinny to have been holding these tree houses up in the first place. So there's this. Yes. So, I mean, that is one of the things here that is quite different, is because they didn't apparently have the money to go film in the same places that they had filmed for Return of the Jedi. And so there is a big difference in that. I think, to me, thinking of this as more of a fairy tale that kids would be told in the Star Wars universe makes it feel much more legitimate, in the sense like it makes so much more sense. It fits better in my brain, and so that's how I choose to think of this, because Fair. Otherwise, I mean, no, this is not Star Wars. It doesn't fit within Star Wars canon whatsoever. it would make no sense in Star Wars canon.
But do you think that it reflects a time period where that was less of a concern? That it was more about just being a Star Wars story, if you will, as opposed to worrying about where it fit in canon? Because, again, 1984, the home video market is really just starting. My family was an early adopter in it, but it was just starting to catch on. So this TV movie, in a sense, is an exercise in capitalizing on the popularity of Star Wars, while at the same time not being overly concerned with the story consistency of Star Wars, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that look, this is meant to be something fun and lighthearted.
Right.
And I don't think that they're thinking, even at this point, which is interesting, even after the debacle of the holiday special, Lucas still is a part of this. Like, he's the executive producer. The story is based off of something he wrote. And so this definitely turns out much better than the holiday special. I mean, it's miles apart from the holiday special, and that's saying something. But I do think it's interesting that Lucas would be interested in doing this in the first place after the holiday special.
Although this is, and the thing is, people can say all that they want. I'm giving too much credit here, and maybe I am. I don't think that I am necessarily, though. You have the hallmarks already of where Lucas is going mentally and emotionally with storytelling, with filmmaking. If he can shoot it in his backyard, basically, why not? If he can exert complete control over it and turn out something on television, which has a much lower budget threshold and expectation and profit expectation than film, why shouldn't he? If he can basically hire somebody to go out with some equipment in the back and make a home movie version of a Star Wars movie, why not see if it can work? And obviously it did, because, and we'll get around to covering it, because there is a sequel to this. There is a follow-up TV movie. So this is something that is successful enough and generates enough interest, riding off of the residual interest in Star Wars from Return of the Jedi coming out in 1983. I see something that is not enduring, but at the same time indicates where Lucas is already trying to take things. There's almost the sense, if I really, really want to read into it, of somebody who wants to continue making films but doesn't want to leave home. And that's sort of the thing when you really think about it. And I'm not trying to get too heavy here or anything like that. But by this point, Lucas has lost his marriage. He's hurting from that. He's still producing Indiana Jones because Temple of Doom comes out. He obviously still wants to be in the game, but he doesn't want to spend the time away from his kids. He doesn't want to spend the time away. He doesn't want to wind up in the same trap, because every story you read about Lucas, basically the making of the original Star Wars broke him in a way. He didn't want to be on set every day. He didn't want to do the day-to-day stuff, but he still wanted to make things. So why not send somebody out there to get the stuff and the materials put together and still play in the universe? I think it also, Lucas said with Return of the Jedi, I've told everything I'm going to tell now. I'm going to come back to it later maybe, but this is it for now. I'm done. But then the Ewok movie comes out from a story he wrote, and the Ewok series and all of that stuff. I think that you can also then take a look at it and say, this is the same impulse that gives birth to the Clone Wars. Every time he's done with Star Wars and he says, I'm done with Star Wars, he comes back to it. And he says, let's try something a little different this time. And let's see how it works in this format. Let's see how it works here and what we can make work. So I think this is an indicator right there of that urge that's always going to be with him with Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I do feel like in some ways this has something akin to the Clone Wars in the sense that this is Lucas trying his hand at fairy tales. And, I think one of the things that makes this not as successful as it could have been was the fact that, that this was meant to be like a 30-minute special that got dragged out to 2 hours because that's what ABC wanted, and that's where Lucas gave ABC what they wanted. This has no business being 2 hours. It should be an hour. That's it.
Yep.
And if this had been an hour, it would have been a much better experience. In fact, I would love for Lucas to go in and give us a special edition of this where he's edited it down to an hour, and I think it would be much more successful.
I agree. I think also what's interesting is you have a couple of things where some of the effects are terrific. And I think some of the matte paintings on here are, even looking at it in this, I say to myself, because I excuse television from that era an awful lot, where people look at, say, Next Generation in the late 80s, early 90s, and they say, how could anybody think that that was Data holding Lore's head? That's obviously a styrofoam dummy head. And conveying to people who maybe aren't old enough to remember the time, most of us were watching it on a 9-inch television screen. Right. There was such a thing as good enough. And to see these beautiful matte paintings work so well on a larger screen in a remastered format is really just a testament to the fact that the crew still cared very, very much. And some of the blue screen work is great. The spiders, I'm not afraid of the spiders. That's a statement. I despise spiders. I'm terrified of spiders. And I watch the spiders in this and I say, okay. There are, you can see the guide wires that they're hanging from, sort of thing.
It's not very good.
No. It's a little, let's say it in a positive way. It's a little too ambitious. But yeah, in terms of stretching it out, it is interesting that we have the sequel thing, and we have the Ewoks TV series. And I almost wonder if his heart just always was in doing the short format 30-minute series. And like you said, everything that we could attribute as a flaw with this is because he decided to give ABC what they wanted.
Yeah, I do think that that's the case. And, I mean, and honestly, the other flaw here is that the child actors are not good.
Now, you wait just a gosh darn minute.
They're not.
Because the little girl is so adorable.
She's be adorable.
So freaking adorable.
But she's also a terrible little actress.
Oh, how dare you? You heartless monster.
I am.
How dare you?
She is not good. Not good. I'd take Jake Lloyd any day.
I don't know. Okay, first and foremost, the shade thrown in that comment. Okay, I have issue with that too. But in all seriousness, like, she is so, it's Aubrey Miller. It's a young Aubrey Miller. She's adorable. I don't know if it's because I have a weakness because I have daughters, but like when she cries, I'm like, oh, somebody help her. Please, somebody help her. I do find it extremely interesting that the boy's name is Mace. Like, all the way back then, Lucas was still trying to give the middle finger to everybody that told him that Mace didn't work as, because Mace Windu was the original name in the story treatments for Star Wars. Even back then, he's giving the middle finger to everybody that said it wouldn't work. He's like, fine, I'll name this guy Mace. How about that? Do you enjoy that? So if we accept this as canon, I'm not saying we should. If we accept this as canon, though, Mace is like John in the Star Wars. We should meet many more people named Mace over time.
Yeah. I do think one of the things that's really interesting about this, and because I'd never seen it, I was really fascinated to hear that this is narrated by Burl Ives. So it has so much in line with, and you can really see, again, Lucas is treating this like a fairy tale, the same type of thing that, Burl Ives doing the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. This is meant to be in that vein, and again, ABC wants a 2-hour movie, and so they have to really stretch this out, and it kind of ruins the intent. And you can really tell there's so much of this where you're just padding. There's that moment where Wicket is on the tree branch and he's just going up and down and up and down, and you're watching him do that, and then it scares the horse, and then that Sindel is in, and they have to run and get her, and it's just like that whole sequence is there because they need 10 minutes, or when he touches the water and ends up underneath the water and then can't get out because apparently it's magic water. I mean, there's just all of these things that happen that just make so little sense, other than the fact that we need a sequence that lasts 5 minutes here.
More or less forced than Starkiller Base. Judgment?
Starkiller Base feels more legitimate than half the things that happen in this little episode.
Okay. That's a fair comment. I'm just curious where on the scale there. I don't disagree. I mean, like this is basically like a TV miniseries, maybe, like if these things were told a half hour at a time, and have like a 1 week, 5-day miniseries was probably the better way to go about it. I don't want to spend, like, as you can tell, I'm struggling because I don't want to spend the time just sort of like stomping on it, but it really is. I think that the Burl Ives thing is fascinating because of the fact that it specifically calls back to the TV programs that Lucas would have been very familiar with. The Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman. And there's very much that sense about these things. And I'm going to give a lot of credit to a listener and friend of the show, Yancey Evans, who said this is basically a Disney movie, a Disney TV movie.
Oh yeah,
of the time, and that's exactly like I'm old enough to remember the tail end of the Disney Sunday night event the Wonderful World of Disney, and every Sunday it was the Wonderful World of Disney. Oh,
I remember
this movie is squarely in that vein, and if I went back and I watched that stuff now, I would say this is garbage, but back then it was good enough. It was a way to kill a couple of hours, but I will say that even back then I wasn't nuts about the Ewok adventure.
Well, I do think the some of the things about this movie that are really interesting and good, the fact that, like you were saying, there's some real ambition here. They are trying to do some things when they have, like you mentioned, the matte paintings, the work that they're doing with the models, the work that they're doing with the stop motion, here. There's just a lot of stuff that they're working on, and again, they're putting this in a TV show, and that's some tough ILM work right there. They would have had to create this, and it would have been a lot of work to do. So some of that's really good. I think the thing that makes this, and I think, look, as a young kid, I probably would have responded to this better, just because, like you said, it is the Disney family movie of the week, and as a 6-year-old, I probably would have loved this much more than I do now, because now it's more about just seeing all the flaws that are in it. But, for kids, I think this would even now just still work, because there's so many fun little things that happen. And I just, the one thing that stuck out to me is that we have the narration because we don't want to run into the same thing that happened where we have 45 minutes of Wookiees grunting at each other.
Correct. Yes.
But the problem with doing these Ewok adventures, and this is why you get the whole thing where the Ewoks have to start to learn to talk because you can't, you're doing these stories with these characters who can't speak English. And so, that's one of the things that, the Clone Wars kind of helps take care of, which is good. So all in all, I just think it's a little too ambitious for its time. And in the end, it's just too long. And that was something where, to get this out, Lucas, gave that up, and he shouldn't have. Should have stuck to his guns.
So final question sort of thing, because I am curious about this, just to get your point of view, is because this is released as part of the Vintage Collection, and we will be hitting other parts of the Vintage Collection. I mean, why not, right? Although I'm not watching all of the Ewoks cartoon series. I refuse to do that. I will not. Okay. So I'm kidding. I will. So my question for you is this: is obviously this is put on Disney Plus as a play to retain subscribers and get views and eyeballs and everything like that. But we also know from other platforms that one of the things that retains eyeballs and subscriptions the best is ongoing series or, long legacy stuff. If Netflix has The Office on it until it goes away, but that's a long commitment to watch that whole thing. The whole run of Cheers is there. You have all of these different shows, Cobra Kai, all original stuff that gets people on there. Do you see any real long-term benefit to putting the Vintage Collection on Disney Plus? Do you see anybody watching this more than one time? Be they an old school fan who wants to say, oh, I saw this on TV when I was really a little kid, or somebody who says, I've never seen this, I want to check this out. Do you see anybody watching this more than once?
No. I mean, at least this, and I'm thinking probably, Battle for Endor is probably the same way. The micro series of Clone Wars, we'll talk about that later sometime. I think that's more rewatchable, just because it's in bite size and it's just more rewatchable. But these two, or this one specifically, I mean, I'll never watch it again. I don't need to. I've seen it once. It's kind of like I saw the holiday special once, and I don't need to ever go back to it again. So
yeah.
It is an interesting thing. Obviously, you put as much content out there as it can, and this gets, I would just say the fan base talking for a week, but then it's over. So it's not like there's really truly any value added.
Yeah, and I think also the release of putting it out there as Marvel's drawing all of the attention for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I mean, it's almost as if it's just being dumped in such a way that they can say they did it, and there's no real fanfare behind this for me. It's there. Oh, okay, I'll take a look at it. And that's an odd sort of thing. Like, it's an odd sort of thing because, and here's where I have the critical side to me, is they knew Disney Plus was coming. I do not understand why we're at a point where Marvel is dropping all of these shows in quick order, but we're having Mando and the Vintage Collection. I don't understand why there wasn't more production for things spun up before this point, so that we're not just dropping the Vintage Collection as opposed to, okay, Mando season 2 is done and now it's time for whatever season 1. And this is one of those rare moments I'm going to speak honestly with everybody. I think this speaks to a mismanagement of the timeline. and it's disappointing to me because even seeing something like, oh, the story of the faithful Wookiee, oh, it's the 9-minute cartoon from the holiday special. Okay, number one, being an old school fan, I've seen this. I've seen it, more than once. Bootleg copies have been out there since 1978. They weren't that hard to track down. It's been on YouTube. Okay. Right? Like, it's one of those things where I wish I wasn't talking about Caravan of Courage. I wish I was talking about Bad Batch already.
Yeah.
Or something else.
No, I agree with that. I think, I was just thinking, we had Resistance, which I think was a true misfire for Star Wars television. I don't think anybody thinks of it as a very good show, unfortunately, because it had promise. There again, it was a show that was like fraught with promise. Like it had, you could have done so much with it, and then they just don't really do anything with it. And yeah, I mean, the fact that we have Mando season 1 and then season 2, and then we've got the Bad Batch coming, but there's been so many things just going on behind the scenes. And you kind of mentioned it, I think we were talking on Snyder Cuts the other day, and you were just mentioning, Disney has just had a ton and Lucasfilm has had a ton of background things happening in everything they're trying to do. And part of it just feels like it hasn't been as well thought out as it should have been from the beginning. And part of that has to do with not understanding or knowing where they want to go story-wise with the entire structure. And I think this is one of those things where it's like we put a Band-Aid on it, so we give fans something until, the next thing comes out.
I agree with the Band-Aid thing, and this is where I will continue. And the thing is, I don't want anybody to come at us and say, oh, you're being too negative sort of thing. This is just an honest assessment sort of thing. We've been nothing but positive, and I'm just offering an opinion here, so please don't come at me that way. But you have a big hubbub about the High Republic, which is a novel series and comic books, which is a 1990s strategy. It's almost a failure to recognize that the landscape has changed. That should have been an animated series of its own or a live action series of its own in development instead of books and comics, because books and comics are not where you're going to get a huge return nowadays. It's just, you'll get the diehards and that's it. It's not the 90s where streaming did not exist. It's such an odd misfire. But to end on the positive note, I still did get the warm and fuzzies of seeing something I had seen on TV as a kid. And I remember, I suddenly had a flash. I'm pretty sure I know the room I watched it in my house. I remember the carpet. I remember the smell of the house because my dad had not quit smoking yet. And so it stank like old cool cigarettes, and Hungry Man dinners, which is what we love to eat. And you have, so I at least got in touch with that. And I remember that small Zenith television that we sat in the main family room. And I think back to it now and I look at my computer monitor here and I think to myself, I watched television on a screen smaller than this. And I was happy. And I was happy when the Ewok adventure came out and it was on there. It's such a strange thing of how technology has shifted our expectation for what we see in such a dramatic way just in one lifetime.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing about this was fun to watch in the sense that it is George Lucas almost doing the thing that he talked about that he would do as he retired, which is go just make experimental films, and just try things, and I think regardless of whether I love this or not, which I didn't, but I think the thing that I appreciate is that George Lucas was willing to try things just to see how they went. And everything had a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, one of the reasons for doing the Young Indiana Jones series became to explore a bunch of different production techniques, to give him the opportunity to figure out how then he was going to, you know, produce the prequels. And a lot of things they do there, and most of the crew that work on the Young Indiana Jones series end up going to work into the prequels. He has this well-oiled machine by then. Everything had a purpose. And so, you know, I do think you're absolutely right when you said at the beginning, this is George Lucas playing around with Star Wars, you know, in some ways. And again, I think more playing in, you know, well, what if I did Star Wars as a fairy tale, like straight up fairy tale, you know? And so that's where these two, at least this film, and I'm thinking, you know, Battle of Endor is similar in some ways, but, you know, this film specifically, I mean, it's just a Star Wars fairy tale. And when taken like that, you know, I think this is something that, you know, any kid from like the ages of 4 to 7 would probably still enjoy watching.
And I look forward to trying to see if a 5-year-old enjoys watching it, because I can tell you that 5-year-old was not into the Ewoks cartoon, not one bit. So that'll be interesting to tell. But if people want to share with you their own views about the Ewok Adventure Caravan of Courage, Matt, where can they find you?
Yeah, find me all over social media under Matt Rushing02. Of course, you could find me here on the network. Drea Kaufman and I are wrapping up Harry Potter. We've been going one chapter at a time through the series, and we've only got, as this episode drops, I think maybe one episode left at that point. So yes, it is truly coming to an end. So I hope you'll check that out. It's perfect for anyone too. You know, whether you're just starting the series or you've read it 100 times. So you can also find me on the TFM network. I'm doing a few shows over there. One is the 602 Club. We talk about all of the fandoms we love. Of course, John and I are over in that feed as well, doing Snyder Cuts, as we've been talking through everything Zack Snyder's directed. So that's been very fun. And then, of course, doing The Orb as well as Literary Treks over there. The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek. But John, you know, if people want to catch up with you and maybe talk a little bit about what's going on with the things on Disney Plus or Star Wars, or maybe they want to see what else you've got going on, where can they find you?
Well, I don't know anybody that would want to do any of those things, but you can find me as Kessel Junkie on your social network of choice, Twitter, Vero. You can find me there. You can also find me, I would encourage you to find me over on Letterboxd, where I have a lot of fun writing pithy reviews, and sometimes pissy reviews of things that I watch, because boy howdy, and I think Matt can attest to this, I'm a very fair reviewer, but I have a penchant for watching some very bad things over time. I don't know why. It's like a moth to a flame. So look for Kessel Junkie. You can also find me here on the Nerd Party, co-hosting a show called House Lights. And of course, you know, I'm over on Snyder Cuts and appearing on occasion over on the 602 Club, which Matt mentioned. So, you know, I got to tell you, fortunately, I have evaded both of the papier-mâché spiders that we encountered before we started recording, but I'm very afraid that there might be a third hiding somewhere. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.